Hi friends, my name is Erin Shariff. I am a mindfulness teacher, a healer, someone who has been dreaming about, envisioning, working towards a better society, a better world, a healthier world for a lot of years. And I am recording this on June 2nd, 2020 in America when we are facing a lot of challenges. A lot of things have been brought to the surface. We're in the middle of a pandemic, we're in the middle of a climate crisis, and we're now in the middle of racial tension and turmoil. Racial injustices are being brought to the surface that have been simmering for a long time. And I am challenging myself as a mindfulness teacher and somebody who has a voice in the community to whatever extent that I do, to step forward and to offer my thoughts, my reflections on what is happening right now and how we can come together and harness the energies to create a more just and peaceful world for all beings. And we here in America, we have been doing a lot of pretending. This country was built on injustices, on violence, on commodifying and using other people, the native peoples, people of color. We have somehow whitewashed all of that to a large extent, and we have been pretending that we can carry on with business as usual without having any atonement or reckoning for any of that. And that has been simply impossible. The delusion around that could not go on forever, and now it appears that our day of reckoning is here. There is a great unraveling of almost all of our institutions and our structures at the same time, and that was inevitable to anyone who has been paying deep attention to the issues at hand. Our entire system of capitalism is built on a faulty premise that we can continue consuming finite resources, turning them into stuff, which keeps the economy chugging along nicely, but which has an expiration date. And when those natural resources are all gone, then that model stops and dies. And as far as I know, there is no plan B. Once we have no more clean water, once the air is polluted beyond the point of no return, beyond the point at which we can sequester carbon and keep some semblance of our environment and our ecosystem as we know it, that date is shockingly close. Some people would argue that we have already passed that. Most experts, as far as I can tell, are saying that we have a few more years left in which we can change our behaviors and live in a more sane and sustainable way. And then after that, it's the point of no return. So we are seeing all of these structures that we have been propping up coming to an end. And they need to come to an end, but of course that is painful because we have not yet charted a clear course to what the new world can look like and will look like. And those are the reflections that I want to offer you today, because a great unraveling can also be a great awakening. And most periods of renewed awakening, shifts of evolutionary awakening, follow periods of extreme struggle. And we are in the extreme struggle right now, and there is potentially growth and awakening and a much better sustainable world on the other side of this, but it all depends on how we show up right now. We need to show up with a humility and a wisdom and to be courageous enough to see that the current system isn't working, and be courageous enough to be willing to let it go and to put the work in that will be required to build something better on the other side. And that work starts within. So the path that we've been calling mindfulness in the West, in some ways mindfulness is not a great word to describe the total potential of that pathway. It's really, mindfulness is just one small part of the path, and the other two parts are a heartfulness and a wakefulness. And the mindfulness is the piece, many of you maybe know it from apps or from courses that you've taken, and for many people the perception is that it's a way to quiet the mind and to access some inner peace. And while that is true, it is woefully incomplete in terms of the full transformative potential if somebody wants to fully immerse themselves in this path. And yes, we need to pay attention. It's a path of insight and wisdom, and it's seeing clearly how we got here. And in some ways, we're falling into this duality of right and wrong, and the police aren't the enemy, people of color aren't the enemy. There's really no enemy, and that doesn't mean that we don't take a stand and want to create new rules and new laws that are more just, for sure. But if we go upstream of all of this, the enemy, if you will, if there is an enemy, the problem is the delusion that we're all separate. And the way out of this is to cultivate a compassion so big that it includes all beings, and seeing how the police got to where they are, and how the people that you think are on the other side, how they got to where they are, and how they're doing the best they can, and how we, perhaps most importantly, what is our role? In some ways, it's intellectual laziness to just say, well, that person's the problem. That political party is the problem. Those people over there are the problem. And not being willing to look and root out that bias within our own soul and our own heart. And how can we root that out and show up in the world differently? And being willing to every single day wake up and say, how can I be the best version of myself? And not just wonder it, but take actual steps towards that. I think many people, many good people, have this false sense that all they need to do is change the administration, and that's going to solve the problem. That is not going to solve the problem. We all need to get in the game. We need an entirely new game. In some ways, if we change the administration, we're still playing the same games. It's sort of like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. We're still on an inexorable march towards destruction. We need an entirely new game. And I know people say, well, how do we do that? It seems so overwhelming. What can I do to change the whole game? And in some ways, the better questions might be, what can I stop doing? Is one better question that we may ask ourselves. What can we stop doing to support, to take our support away from this violent, biased system? And some answers to that might be to stop consuming so much, to stop taking up so much resources. And there's a million ways that we can all do that. I'm working on that every single day. Just a few little things that I've gotten rid of in my own life: bottled water. I don't even use single-use plastic trash bags anymore, because that's why I create trash, to produce trash. So I'm continually trying to up my game in that regards on behalf of the earth. Educating ourselves on what are the biggest industries and causes of destruction and climactic distress, and withdrawing our support of those industries and solutions. And yes, fossil fuels is a big one, and also the animal agriculture industry is another one. And globally, that is the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases. So we can choose to withdraw our support from that industry for both the planet and for those sentient beings trapped in that system. We can make other choices in that regard, but that takes education questioning the American paradigm and what we've been taught. And food is so tied into all of our systems and our identity as a people. But when you commit to a path of inquiry and a path of compassion and non-harming as much as is possible, it's not entirely possible to be alive and not do some harm, but we can intend to do the least amount of harm possible. And that's hugely empowering. So in terms of the what can I do, you can ask yourself, what can I stop doing? And also you can ask, how can I be? How can I, because the doing comes from the being. And the way to change the being is through changing what you're doing internally. And this is where the mindfulness comes in, and this is where the heartfulness comes in. There are very specific practices that we can engage in to rewire our nervous system. And in a lot of cultures, the word for mind and heart are the same word. They're not even a separate word. And we are so over-reliant on the mind in Western culture and thinking and rationalizing that we don't even realize that there are entirely other intelligences in the body that are atrophied. So we can practice things like metta, loving kindness, self-compassion. These are things that can be strengthened through what we do with our mind and how we show up in the world. And so those are things you could practice every single day. And whatever side you perceive as being on the other side, whoever you might perceive as being the enemy, you can include them in your loving kindness practice, working on understanding and compassion for all beings everywhere, no matter how they're behaving. Because that, to the extent that it's possible, is the way out of this. And as the Buddha said, hatred is never overcome by hatred. It's only overcome by love. And it does not mean accepting the status quo. It does not mean spiritually bypassing and letting an atrocity be committed right in front of you, but it's that seeing clearly and harnessing that anger, righteous anger that arises when you see such injustice into skillful action in the world, understanding and having compassion for everyone, because we're all in this together, and feeling into the size of the cloth that connects all of us. We're all connected. The air, the trees, the earth, the water, all humans and all non-humans. Every action has a ripple effect on the whole. It's not just about us. We're not isolated beings. And that's another way we've been misled by the culture and the perhaps well-meaning institutions like the education system. And when people say we need to funnel more money into education, well, yes and no. Yes, we need everyone to be educated, but the current system of education is actually part of the problem, because there's no shortage of knowledge. We're living in a world where there's never been more access to knowledge, easy access to knowledge, but there is a real dearth of wisdom. And if we are going to force mass education on people, we need to look clearly at what we're doing and how we're doing it and what it's serving. Our current education system in America was created to create factory workers and military members. So it was created upon a system that was built on conformity, on forcing people to accept certain facts that the government has said. These are the facts that we're forcing you to know. And I'm not saying that it's not helpful for everyone to know how to do things like read and write, but we could be doing that in a different way, in a less authoritarian, top-down way, and encouraging people, teaching them how to think, teaching them how to care for others. We could be prioritizing wisdom and compassion and interconnectedness rather than prioritizing competition and memorization and things like that, and creating future consumers. So I am suggesting that we need an entirely different game of education as well, and that it's not enough to say we're going to just double down on this system. We need an entirely new system if we want to create an entirely new society. We need to be honest about our roots as a country, even when it's painful, if we want to be able to transcend those behaviors and create something more compassionate and enlightened in the future. We can't do that if we can't be truthful and honest with ourselves about how we got here. We can look at our healthcare system and say, yes, absolutely, everyone should have access to healthcare. But we also need to ask, why does everyone need so much healthcare? Why are we so sick? And really care about the answer to that question, even if it is going to impact our precious economy. We can't keep polluting our air and our water, and we can't keep subsidizing foods that are making people sick and ill. We can't, if we really care about a more enlightened, healthy society, we need to all look at the roots of all of this. We need to see where our own government, who's supposed to be representing us, is making poor choices that are keeping people sick. And again, you can't just give your power away to the guy that you hope gets elected or the woman that you hope gets elected. We all need to educate ourselves, our minds and our hearts, so that we are very clear about how we got here, what's going on right now, and where we want to go in the future. We all need to take responsibility for looking at health, why we're so sick, and what it's going to take to get out of this. We need to start where we are, being gentle with ourselves and kind with ourselves about how we got here, but being willing to commit to awakening every single day. And I know people right now are scared that many people are out of work. They're not sure how they're going to pay their bills. They've got kids home. This is in some ways a really inopportune time to ask people to commit to their awakening. But at the same time, there's never been a more critical time to do it. We need to commit to developing our compassion and having that be the overarching intention for navigating this crumbling world. We need to be willing to see with a piercing clarity how we got here and where we are. We need to move away from the immature, dualistic thinking that the virus is an enemy. How did this virus get here? This has been predicted by biologists for decades and decades because of our treatment of the natural world. This did not come out of nowhere. So on this day when things seem so chaotic and perhaps hopeless, I want to leave you with hope, because all of the problems that we see around us were created from a misunderstanding in the heart of humans, from greed, hatred, and delusion that live in the hearts of humans. And those things can be rooted out and transformed through deliberate and collective effort. There is an elegant pathway that has been mapped out for us for thousands and thousands of years. It's not a hypothetical. It's not something that is only achievable by people who commit to living in a monastery or a cave. It's accessible to each and every one of us at this moment in time, which is the good news. And it's also very empowering to feel like you are doing something every single day to be part of the solution. You're letting go of something every single day. That's another beautiful thing about this liberative path that we've called mindfulness, is that it's not really getting stuff. You don't have to get anything. We just have to be willing to sit and look and see what we've accumulated that we don't need, that we can put down. The biases, the pieces of the ego, those things we can put down through deliberate effort. And each thing that we put down, we're lighter and more able and capable to be part of the solution that is needed. So it's not a hiding. It's not a tepid kind of platitude of let's just get some calm for ourselves. It's not just a path of personal transformation. It's potentially a path of collective awakening that can happen. And if enough of us commit to this and we reach a critical mass, we can create a tipping point on this planet where this new state of being can be the new normal. So you can be a data point of light and hope, even if it's just for one person, even if it's just for yourself. Commit to doing what you can do, to being the most compassionate, courageous version of you, so that together we can be a voice for the voiceless, for our brothers and sisters of color who have been so badly victimized throughout our history, to be able to name that and do our best to stand up with them, to be a voice for all of the other creatures of the earth, to start to scrub away the cloud of our own speciesism, and how that is an unnecessary piece of violence that we're maybe committing every single day by what we eat and how we're entertained, what we wear, things like that. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So it's not about perfection, but it's about starting somewhere, being willing to engage and be part of the solution. This is a work that I'm committed to myself every single day, and I know that I probably have a long ways to go, but I can't think of anything more important to be doing right now. And if I can be helpful to you in any way, please let me know if you want specific action steps that you can be taking, specific practices that you can engage in. I'd be very happy to share some resources with you. But this practice, we've called it mindfulness. It's potentially much bigger. It's a pathway to insight, to liberation, to interconnection and compassion for all beings, so that we can together work to create a future that works better for everybody. Thank you so much for listening, for your attention, and I am wishing you peace and wishing peace for all beings.